stop listening to atheist YouTubers.
Shut up, fool!
Happy Thanksgiving. I had a good Thanksgiving. Hopefully you did. So this is going on live. Let's listen.
In their judgment, it has to be well supported evidentially as well. And one of my critiques of the minimal facts approach is that oftentimes there's a bait and switch that takes place because the group appearances are not part of the minimal facts approach, and it certainly or don't meet the minimal facts criteria, actually.
So this is Jonathan McClatchy. I've talked to him many times. This is Sean McDowell. I have never talked to him face to face. I actually agree with Jonathan on some things here on the minimal facts.
The Gospels and Acts, and so when one pushes back against a minimal facts theorist by postulating some sort of objective vision experience or some sort of hallucinatory experience, then it's typical to respond to that by appealing to the implausibility of group or shared hallucinations or objective visions, etc. But that is to then bring in data points that are not affirmed by that overwhelming scholarly consensus.
Yeah, the problem here is most people today, really old texts are not going to cut it. But I enjoy listening to this sort of thing.
The Pauline corpus in particular, rather than the Gospels and Acts, especially texts like 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 8, which lists various appearances of Jesus.
Apologia is there. Or it was legend, yeah. I'm a little bit behind. I'm about 15 minutes behind. I'll speed it up a bit.
And last of all, of course, did Paul himself. And it's often argued that predates Paul's own composition, and it's a pre-Pauline oral creedal tradition that he likely received from the apostles themselves. The problem, though, is that on the basis of 1 Corinthians 15 and the Pauline corpus more broadly, it's very difficult to say with confidence anything about what the alleged experiences were purportedly like. And if we're not able to say what the alleged experiences were supposedly like, it becomes very difficult to say with confidence that the apostles were rational in affirming that Jesus was.
Yeah, it was probably just a Pentecostal type meeting where everybody just felt the presence of Jesus, and Jesus appeared to them in that sense.
That the Gospels and Acts actually do reflect the unembellished testimony of those who were purportedly eyewitnesses of Jesus' resurrection, and of course is prepared to argue for that fact. And that being the case, then basically there's three.
I wonder if Jonathan realizes that his style of speech doesn't resonate with people. Like, it's so easy to tune out with him.
One is that they were lying about it, or one is that Jesus in fact did rise from the dead. And if
yes, the trilemma argument, they're the lying, mistaken, or what was the third one?
Not just individual sightings from a great distance and very briefly,
or it actually happened.
Involved in group sightings, group conversations with Jesus, physical contact with Jesus, eating with Jesus on more than one occasion.
Well, I for Christians listening, I got to tell you the truth. I have a time machine. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. None of that happened. There was this guy, a preacher, he died. They loved him. They started making up these stories that he rose from the dead for a greater good so they can go to heaven. And then these stories were embellished, and none of any eyewitnesses wrote the New Testament, and that's that. Simple. I was there. I saw it. Never happened.
I don't have to deal with a claim of contradictions because I'm advancing certain historical truths that we can know independently of a larger case for the gospel.
Easy, cocky Cortex. McClatchy always seems like he's really got to pee. I actually can see that. That's funny.
See that as a significant downside. How would you approach an objection like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I consider it a privilege rather than a burden to offer a defense of the robust reliability of the Gospels and Acts. I think that the vast majority of the supposed discrepancies, contradictions between the Gospel accounts and between Acts and the letters of Paul are very, very weak. There's a small handful of supposed discrepancies that are interesting and need some work to unpack. But the vast majority of them vaporize under close inspection or have very, very plausible harmonizations.
He said the vast majority of them. What Sean McDowell should ask, well, what contradictions, apparent contradictions, do you think cannot be harmonized that are actually legitimate?
Hamas came up with the minimal facts approach. I think if I remember correctly, in 1979, Michigan State, in an academic setting, defending the resurrection and got it cleared in a public university versus a popular level case. So when I teach my class on the resurrection of Biola, a number of students will say, I can see the value on an academic level approaching it this way, but on a more popular level, they'll take a different approach. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so often this objection is expressed by pointing out that the maximal data approach takes too long to say and people lose interest, whereas the maximal data approach is
No, you gotta meet people where they're at, Jonathan. If you want people to become Christians or even Muslims, you gotta help them with real problems, not just people helping people, but God has to come down and actually do stuff. That's how you convince people.
Epistemologically, to justify robust confidence in the resurrection of Jesus. And so we have to use a maximal data approach. And then I would also argue that you can provide a condensed summation of the maximal data approach in the way that I just did previously. I didn't give you a 2-hour lecture on the reliability of the gospel and Acts. I gave you a succinct summary. And if you want justification of the premises, I'm happy to go on for at length on that.
Okay, super helpful. Those of you, I see some comments coming in. We're going to come to your questions at the end. Think of your toughest questions on the resurrection and write question in caps, and we will work through some of those as we get to the end. But let's jump into some of the evidence. And a lot of this evidence was discussed between Allison and between Lacona in that recent dialogue. I'd love to hear your take on it. They talked about the value or lack thereof in the appearance of the 500. So one of the things that Allison will point out that a lot of people do is we don't know where it happened. We don't know when it happened. We don't know a name of anybody within this 500. There's no additional corroboration for it.
Not only that, but you don't have any examples of someone who actually says, hi, everybody, this is so-and-so. This is what I saw. That's typically what people think about as an eyewitness account. It's not in the New Testament, except for Paul. And that was a couple of years after Jesus flew up into the clouds.
Another good experience for 1 Corinthians 15, namely the appearance to the 12. But it gives us no information about what those experiences were supposed to have been like. And Dale Allison, of course, in the book on the resurrection, contains a whole chapter on Marian apparitions with a case study of one. And
case study of one.
If you can't say what the resurrection experiences were,
there's thousands of cases of people claiming to have seen Mother Mary,
and or the conclusion of having witnessed the resurrected Christ. And so I do think that the appearance of the 500 in 1 Corinthians 15 carries some evidential value, but I do think it's a major line of argument. I tend to think, and this is speculation on my part, that the appearance of the 500 is quite plausibly the same event as described in Matthew 28 in Galilee, which seems to have been a meeting with prior appointment. And of course, Matthew 28 mentions that some doubted, which suggests that there were more present than the 12 who had already had an encounter with the risen Jesus. So that's my speculation, but I do think the appearance of the 500 is a major line of argument in the case for the resurrection.
Okay, I appreciate that you admit that.
Yeah, but it's not good enough for him to believe that Jesus rose. I've asked him that question myself, and he would say, nope, that's not good enough. It's not sufficient.
Direction. Wouldn't throw it out, but wouldn't start there with your case either.
Exactly,
okay. Yeah. Now, one of the suggestions that's been made is that Mark has less historic value because it doesn't have some of the same supernatural elements we see in later Gospels. It doesn't have an appearance of Jesus, only a report about a pending appearance of Jesus. So would you accept that premise, given that you have a maximal value one, and move from Mark to the other Gospels to make your case?
Yeah, so I think that, so Allison in the debate mentioned that Mark is the least apologetically helpful. And It's often pointed out that Matthew and Luke have more details regarding the resurrection appearances than Mark does. And of course, John is the most detailed of all. And so you've got this supposed development from very few details to many details in the latest of the Gospels. And one point I'd make there is there's a number of points that bear on this. First of all, the argument, in my judgment, for the reliability of John and Luke undercut the idea that they were including made-up stories as part of a development or embellishment. And we have reason to believe from their access to witnesses, in John's case being one of the witnesses, and from their care that they weren't just including made-up stuff, much less making up stuff themselves. And furthermore, we don't know. I mean, Mark, of course, as you know, terminates at the end of verse 8. The long ending of
Sean's
Mark,
pulled into the lead.
Is a later addition, which almost all textual critics would affirm.
Sure.
That being the case, we don't know how Mark would have finished it had he included an actual narrative of the resurrection appearance.
But to be fair, he has a half an hour head start on me.
Intended to finish at verse 8, or whether there was an original ending that subsequently been lost. Now, then the question is, okay, so now we're down to 3 Gospels: Matthew, Luke, and John. And Matthew and Luke seem to have been written around the same time. It doesn't seem that one is literally dependent upon the other, and so that leaves you with essentially 2 data points. You've got Matthew and Luke being less detailed than John, and that's not a very robust foundation for an argument. Now, in terms of marks of independence between Matthew and Luke, that suggests that it's not that Luke is simply taking Matthew's account and adding details. For one thing, the very fact that Matthew describes only a meeting in Galilee between Jesus and the male disciples, while Luke describes only a meeting in Jerusalem between Jesus and the 11 and those who are with them, shows the independence of their accounts. Now, some scholars, of course, try to deny that by saying that Luke is redacting or inventing.
We have word for word, almost like 99% word for word, copying of Matthew and Luke from Mark, if Mark was written first, which most scholars believe. How is that not plagiarism? And they don't even give Mark credit. Well, Mark doesn't even give himself credit because he doesn't name himself, nor his source. Can you imagine if history was done today like it was done in the first century? I mean, historians would be a laughing stock today. Oh, I like that. The way they did history in the first century, they'd be a laughing stock today. How they don't cite their sources.
There's an earthquake, there's 2 angels, there's the dead rising, which are clearly supernatural elements that arise later in Matthew. But when you look at the story as a whole, you've still got a resurrection, you've still got angels. That development is arguably less than people would say. But second, when it comes to the criterion of multiple attestation, people will often say Matthew, Mark, and Luke count as one because they're relying on a common source. John maybe a second. Sounds like you would reject that approach and say, even though they borrow some of the material from Mark, they're still independent, reliable witnesses that give us a larger cue.
Yeah, totally independent?
That is correct. In that particular case, I was saying that Luke is independent of Matthew, which is generally agreed upon. Though it's often thought that Matthew and Luke may be drawing upon a common source or cue. But I certainly think that even though there's a synoptic problem where the synoptic gospels are literally dependent upon one another.
I remember mentioning the synoptic problem to Mike Winger 5 years ago, and he didn't know what it was.
Evidence of independent access to the events as well.
I think that's true. Or maybe he just knew it by a different name. I don't know.
Passion narratives is one example where there is very definite independent access to these events. And as you rightly said, Matthew, of course, contains the rising of the saints in Matthew 28 at Jesus' crucifixion, which is not found in Luke. So there's an example where you've got the reverse happening.
And the guards that are not found in Luke as well. So there's a lot of independent material. Okay, we're going to come back to your case for the Gospels themselves.
It's kind of a catch-22. If it's not found in other things, it's not multiply attested, but then it's not independent, or it isn't independent. What am I trying to say? I don't know. I'm still hungover from all the turkey.
First off, I'm curious, do you think Paul's appearance is visionary? And in what sense would it be visionary? How do you take Paul's appearance in comparison with the others there?
Well, it was certainly vision-like in the sense that the traveling companions who were present with Paul on the road to Damascus didn't see anyone. And of course, with a vision-like experience, you couldn't take a photograph of it, right? In the same way that you could if Jesus physically rose and appeared to someone, then you could take a picture of it.
Paul's Jesus' appearance to Paul was vision-like, says Jonathan McClatchy. That's being like kind of pregnant, right?
It's often pointed out that Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 adds his own appearance in verse 8 to the other appearances. And since Paul's appearance seems to have been vision-like, then on what basis do we say that the other apostles did not have similar vision-like experiences? And that would, of course, be Dale Allison's interpretation.
That's the quote so far of the day. It was vision-like.
There's a number of things that one can say there.
Whoa, Cameron Bertuzzi's up to 844 Patreons? Yeah, I gotta switch to Roman Catholicism.
He's talking about so in Paul's statement, eschaton de panton espere to ekramati ophi camus, and last of all, as to one untimely born, he was seen also by me. So this may be argued draws a separation between his experience from that of the other apostles that were before him. So Kirk McGregor notes on that, and I quote, "This observation rules out the possibility that Paul is here attempting to convey that he experienced Christ in a manner qualitatively identical to those listed in the Creed." But Paul moves a step further by placing "he was seen also by me" after ospere to ekramati. Paul explicitly shows that to be a qualified.
Jonathan's doing his Muslim impersonation, trying to, instead of Arabic, trying to speak Greek.
To ekramati, to explain how the character of his experience, of his appearance, was likely qualitatively distinct from those recounted by the primitive tradition. While the previous disciples saw Jesus in the normal fashion, Paul admits to have, as to one untimely born, seen Jesus, namely to have seen him in an abnormal fashion. And I think that evidence is surely suggestive, but it doesn't seem to me to be conclusive. He might simply be indicating that Paul might simply be indicating that he had had an encounter with the risen Jesus, with the risen Lord, despite the fact that Paul had not known Jesus during his earthly ministry. So I think that's also a possible interpretation. But I think that the most decisive way of making this argument is to point out that, and to argue for it, the proposition that Luke was a traveling companion of the Apostle Paul. And that being the case, and there's an avalanche of evidence that establishes that, then
but part of that evidence that's missing is Luke actually saying that he wrote Luke or Acts and that he was a traveling companion. He never says that himself, does he, Jonathan?
When Paul meets with the Jerusalem elders, it says all the elders, including James, were present, and so forth. And so I think that that's the best way of making that argument. And of course, the minimal facts approach doesn't really appeal to Acts in making that case, because that's not part of the minimal. It doesn't meet the book of Acts.
Take 1 Corinthians 15 by itself, and Paul seems to list himself amongst the other kinds of appearances. You would say if we stick just in 1 Corinthians 15 itself, it gives us not enough information to conclude the kind of appearance that Paul had. That alone is just Acts. Again, Luke being a traveling companion of Paul who writes Acts and includes his take and his speeches.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted because I drank, but I said I asked the same question to him directly.
Have a more robust understanding of it. Is that fair?
1 Corinthians 15 is not enough.
Puts himself in 1 Corinthians 15. You got the 12, you got the other apostles, Peter, James, etc., and himself. So he views his appearance as sufficient to be listed as an appearance, qualify as an apostle, but different from the others because you said the people around him would not have videotaped it. So you see this, if I understand correctly, as a supernatural kind of intervention from God, but it was internal for Paul rather than external. Is that fair?
That is correct. Not to say that it is not a veridical experience. I think it is, because if Acts 9 actually does reflect the testimony of the Apostle Paul, which I would maintain it does, then...
This is why I love the Flying Man so much. There's no way on planet Earth that these two would believe my ancestor flew literally over the Grand Canyon based on the same type of evidence. And this guy's even admitted that.
Commissions him to the role of apostle and so forth. And he's also blinded by the experience, and he's healed later by Ananias. And so it's
super helpful. I'm curious as I think about this, if you're given a public defense to like a group of high school students or a church, and they say, hey, Dr. McClatchy, speak on the resurrection. You got 45 minutes. Don't give me your talk, but give me your quick summation of how you would make a case for someone who doesn't understand these nuances. Because obviously the minimal facts approach is going to say, we know Jesus died, buried, maybe that probably is including minimal facts, but died, there's certain appearances. The empty tomb doesn't fit within it, but the appearance,
there's certain beliefs of appearances.
to Paul, etc. Lay out those minimal facts. What would yours look like in that kind of audience?
Yeah, so I would present the argument much like I did previously, which is to say that the Gospels and Acts actually do reflect the unembellished testimony of those who were purportedly eyewitnesses of Jesus' resurrection. And that being the case, and of course I'm prepared to justify that if questioned, then the nature and variety of the resurrection encounters are difficult to explain on the hypothesis that the apostles were honest and mistaken, because they involve group conversations with Jesus, long discourses like the Emmaus disciples, for example, in Luke 24. They involve eating with Jesus on more than one occasion. Luke 24, Jesus eats broiled fish in their presence. In John 21, Jesus makes breakfast for them on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. It involves physical contact, like Jesus invites Thomas to touch him in the Gospel of John. You have physical contact in Luke. And
like if you had one verse in the Bible that says Jesus died, rose again, and ate fish with someone, and that person touched the holes in his hands, but that's all you had, would you believe it? Of course not. And then why, just by adding more of those types of verses, does it become believable? I don't know.
Fruits feast, which is, according to Leviticus 23, to be celebrated the day following the first Sabbath following the Passover, which lands you on the Sunday, which of course is the day, according to all four Gospels, that Christ was raised from the dead. And there's no competing tradition with it. There's no tradition that competes with that. And then also the early church fathers maintained that they were to gather together to worship on the Lord's Day, the first day of the week, very, very consistently. There's no deviation from that. And you find that even in the New Testament, in Revelation, John says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day. He doesn't take time out to explain what the Lord's Day is. In Paul talks about gathering a collection on the first day of the week. In the book of Acts, also, the Christians meet to break bread on the first day of the week on the Lord's Day. And so that's that correlation between the Feast of First Fruits and Christ's resurrection, it points to the end of the world. He's the first fruits of the
I'm trying to think of how, if I was a Christian, how I would defend this. It's definitely not the way Jonathan's doing it, but how would I do it? I think I would have to appeal to, it just feels good. Knowing that I'm not alone, knowing that I can live forever, although I don't like that idea. Knowing that I could say something like, oh, I know Jesus spoke to me in this one moment crisis back in the 80s. But these guys have to know that what they're doing is not effective. We got the data out, right? It doesn't work.
We'll come back to that. I think the challenge for the maximal data approach is to make it memorable to people, understandable, and to make it sink home. Because that was a lot of information. I know students and I know people in the church audience are going to feel like if you just give me 4 facts and why the resurrection explains it, that's a lot easier to memorize and grasp. So I'm not saying anything within the case you said is false, but that's a challenge to try to say.
Yeah, and let me save some time for Christians listening. If you're trying to witness and you're using both either minimal facts or maximal facts, 90+% of the time, it will not work. The person first has to be desperate, born in it, and then backslid and then feels guilty. Some tragedy has to happen in their life, or they really desperate for community, or they got a spouse that's a Christian or Muslim. What you guys are doing here will not work. What will work is start doing some amazing stuff in the name of Jesus. And I know you hate that because you know that it's not going to happen.
I wanted to clarify a misconception about the maximal data approach that I actually found in Dale Allison's book. On page 714, he actually briefly alludes to the maximal data approach. He says, because the maximal data approach, of course, was pioneered and developed by Tim and Lydia McGrew. And he said, he's quoting from, or he's alluding to the Black.
Chris Kuern asks, why do you think the appearance of Paul is discussed so much? It's because it's the earliest source, and it's also the only source that uses the first person. It's a real eyewitness account of a vision. That's why it's talked about so much. Oh, a vision like, as Jonathan McClatchy would put it. But you're right. It in Revelation chapter 1, it's sort of Paul-ish, but it's so late, and it's also clearly a vision as well.
In Luke 24:36-43, and John 20:24-29, and other resurrection texts reflect the unembellished testimony of the original apostles. They reflect what the original apostles were saying about the resurrection. And so then we try to give an account for why they're making that claim. So we're not assuming the detailed ficticity. That's the conclusion of the argument.
Yeah, like a non-Christian is never going to buy that, Jonathan. They're not. They're going to say, oh, the text says that Jesus walked with them and talked with them for 40 days. You really think that someone who doesn't have a history of Christianity in their family and are not desperate and are content and happy in life, they could still believe in God, but do you think that will actually move them to think, oh yeah, okay, that happened? No.
Dismissing them. And so he points to these rainbow bodies as a way of saying, there's comparable evidence for this supernatural feat. How should we approach that if we're going to be consistent? Now, you've thought about this. I think you've done some critique on it.
Hey, James, I got 2 masters. That's better than 1 PhD.
And then give your criticism of it.
Sure. So this is in chapter 12 of Dale Allison's book.
James, you can hop in. Have you ever hopped onto my channel before? We need Dr. Fodor in here.
Or a robe, sometimes leaving nothing behind but the robe, and sometimes even shrinking to smaller size over time. And a rainbow is seen over the place where the body lay. And so Allison, as I said, devotes...
Yeah, so right now they're just talking about the outsider test of faith. And whenever Christians are given the outsider test for faith, like, okay, you believe this about Jesus, why don't you believe this about other religions? They'll just constantly talk about the differences.
Talks about something else, saying, look at how evidence... look how weak the evidence for this other thing is, and so the evidence for Christianity is weak as well. And I think that what Allison is doing is a cousin of this. So he implies that you have to, in order to be consistent, accept both or neither of those. And if you fail to link them in that way, then you're being prejudiced in favor of your Christian beliefs. So in his book, he says, and I'm quoting, he says, "What would follow if every single one of
in his book? It's a mixture between Scottish and Irish and English and Canadian. Book.
The apologist should here be ill at ease. Would not rejection of all the non-Christian stories reinforce the skeptic's repeated insistence that religious sincerity and eyewitness testimony do not ensure the historical truth?" And of course, that depends. Is any maximal data apologist worth his... As maximal data apologists, we're not...
We'll get to the questions here. Must be coming soon.
There's no context of persecution or danger in this case for the people who are actually making the claim of these rainbow bodies.
Still talking about rainbow bodies.
In-depth analysis of rainbow bodies, I think, would be helpful. So I appreciate Dale Allison bringing this kind of charge. Ultimately, in my experience, we have these kind of objections. They seem to have some force, but when we probe into the details, for example, these things bubble to the surface, like the context of an unexpected resurrection within time. You proclaim it costs you something. And like Michael Kona pointed out, skeptics who see the risen Jesus is qualitatively different than those for rainbow bodies.
Always focus on the differences. But even the things he said, like, you have one skeptic who even claims that they saw the risen Jesus, and that's Paul. And I bet you anything, Paul had family members, cousins, whatever, who were already Christians at that time. And he started feeling guilt.
Excellent. Well, this is in chapter 14 of Dale Allison's book, where he brings up a particular case study of an apparition of Mary called the appearance in situ.
Yeah, why are they talking about Dale Allison so much? Because he's a really nice guy. Like, Christians, atheists alike like him. And he basically admits, as a Christian, the evidence found in the New Testament is not sufficient to warrant belief in it.
At Zitun was recorded in 1968, and the phenomenon was seen by two Muslim bus mechanics. Of course, Mary is revered in Islam as well, and they claimed to witness a woman. And it seems to me very clear there's obviously some sort of autosuggestion going on here. So here's the quote.
Close attention to methodology. And so that's when we come to the resurrection, all of us have certain assumptions, and it's going to shape the way we're going to look at the data. Habermas has said he thinks the biggest objection to the resurrection is not a particular theory, but it's rejection of the supernatural and the possibility of miracles. It's on a worldview level. Now, you disagree with the minimal facts. Would you agree with that point?
Yes, I would.
Okay, awesome. Good, quick Twitter answer. So I've got one more question for you, and then we'll go to questions. So those of you, Christian skeptic.
Okay, so yeah, the problem here is I think you have to view the New Testament and what happened in the first century the same way as you would go to places like Haiti, places in Africa, places that have not been touched by the Enlightenment. And you can be a born-again Christian here in the United States, and you go in those places, and I bet you anything, you would say to yourself, this is crazy. This is nuts. They believe that? They believe you can take some pigeon feathers and wave them around and heal people of cancer? Like, we have science now. We got modern medicine. But the people in the first century were like the people I'm describing now with the feathers. So I can say, yes, I am open to the possibility of miracles happening, the laws of nature as we know it today being broken through an incantation of Jesus' name. I can be open to that. I would love to see something like that. But why would you, as a rational, reasonable human being, come out of the gate and say, oh yeah, Jesus predicted his death and resurrection? Yeah, I can believe that. What's in you that would say, yeah, that's reasonable, as opposed to someone penned it in later, or just penned in that Jesus walked for 40 days and talked and ate with people? Like, what's wrong with you that you would automatically say, oh yeah, look, we just got a bunch of this, so it's reasonable to believe?
Whatever. Muslim.
Yes, people can call in. Links on the top of the live stream chat.
Write as question in caps so we can see it. We'll pull them in. Maybe in this we would advance without all the details here. Maybe we'll have you come back and talk about this. I know Lydia McGrew is doing some great work in this area. When we talk about the gospel's reliability as a whole, a part of this maximal case, what are some of the...
Yeah, maybe I should ask a question, but what question should I ask? And will he read it? Hey, is James. Are you a doctor?
Hi, Doug. No, I'm working on my PhD at the moment, but I am not a doctor yet.
How close are you?
Well, if things go well, maybe another 2 years.
Okay. And what's your dissertation topic?
Well, I'm studying cognitive science, particularly the science of language and how humans form representations of words and sentences. So what I study is sort of the intersection of artificial intelligence and cognitive psychology and neuroscience.
Okay. So if computers take over the world, we have you to blame.
Yeah, well, that's one way of looking at it.
Are you agreed with me that all this talk about the resurrection that Jonathan's spouting here has zero impact on people who are not raised in it or desperate for it?
People who are not raised in it or desperate for it. Yeah, I probably wouldn't say zero impact, but close to zero impact. I think there are a small number of people who find this sort of stuff, who aren't raised in it and who find this sort of stuff interesting, but it's pretty small. Most, I mean, this would be consistent with your experience, I guess, but most atheists that I know or people who aren't raised Christians just, yeah, they don't care about this stuff
Well,
at
yeah,
all.
well, you and I do care about it, but I'm saying even us who care about it, it's not actually persuasive enough for us to flip the switch and say we're going to be Christians now, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. There are a couple of people who I know who have found the sort of resurrection stuff somewhat compelling, who weren't raised in it. But I don't know that I know anyone who's been like convinced because of it. The only argument that I can think of that seems to be convincing to some people is like the moral argument, like actually sort of convincing in the terms of getting them to change their religious convictions. I don't think the resurrection argument, maybe, yeah, for someone who's like desperate or who is already pretty close to believing for other reasons, then that
Why
might
do you
tip
say
them
the
over the
moral
edge.
argument? Because I wouldn't have chosen that one. I would have maybe said first cause arguments are more powerful than moral arguments for a lot of people. Why do you say moral argument?
Oh, the only reason I say that is not because of I think it's a good argument. It's just because I've encountered people who seem to think that is, or yeah, who have cited that at least as a
Right,
reason
but
for
why
their
do you think they
conversion.
think it's a good argument?
Well, that's hard to say. Often, often when I interrogate that, you don't get a lot of specifics. But if I had to guess, um, it's probably that they just have a sense that something more is needed to account for something that they think is really important, like morality.
Hmm.
Because morality is like I don't think resurrection claims are intrinsically important to anyone who's not already a Christian, but morality is intrinsically important to a lot of people. And certain types of person feel that something like external is needed for that. They have some kind of sense that it needs, I don't know, something stronger than whatever they think that can be provided without God. So I think it's more of a psychological thing, I guess.
What if you were in the room with McClatchy and McDowell right now? What would you ask either one of them?
Yeah, I only got a little bit of the stream, so I don't entirely know what the direction they're taking is, but
So
it sounds like
the
the usual
basic
thing.
resurrection
Yeah, yeah.
evidence, and it's poo-pooing minimal facts and praising maximal facts.
Yeah, well, in a way, I think that's kind of the right approach, but it raises a whole host of additional problems. Um, yeah, well, it'd be interesting to ask about how they think we can establish all of the additional facts beyond the minimal ones. The minimal ones are supposed to be ones that have good historical, credibility.
Yeah.
So the question is, well, if you want to go beyond that, what's the justification? The other question that I typically like to ask is, how does the resurrection hypothesis explain the facts that they're putting forward? Because usually that's not really addressed. Like, why is it that we would expect God to want to appear to, or like Jesus to want to appear to Paul, for example? How is that explained by the hypothesis that God raised Jesus from the dead?
Okay, let's ask a question in the live stream chat right now together. It has to be short, pithy, and also makes them want to pee their pants. Is it a historical fact that Jesus walked on water? Okay, you like that one?
Yeah, be interesting to see what they say. I don't know. I really have no idea what their response would be if they're not following a minimal facts approach. I know more about the minimal facts direction, which would usually just say it doesn't matter because that's not relevant to the resurrection directly.
Okay, I'll ask it.
But if you're going to want to say, well, it's not just a random claim of resurrection; it's in the context of his, Jesus's life and miracles and so forth, which is what some people say. Then that could be a relevant question.
Oh, they got one question in here. Let's see who asked what. What about the contradictions in the resurrection accounts? How many people were at the tomb? How many angels were there? Yeah, no, this is not a good question to ask apologists like these guys, right? Because they got that memorized. They know how to deal with that.
Yeah, well, if you're sufficiently creative, you can harmonize pretty much everything. That the whole harmonization approach I think is fundamentally flawed. But if you're into maximal facts, then that's probably the approach you'll take. The minimal facts would just be to say that the differences don't matter. That the focus is just on the things that are agreed upon, and that is sufficient.
Yeah, this guy named Brooklyn asked, do you think it's a good idea to make an argument for the resurrection based on a conclusion you've already reached? For example, the Bible's true, so the resurrection must be true. I don't think Jonathan would say that, though. He would say, well, We just view the Bible as any other historical text, and we look at the evidence, and we can come to the conclusion the best explanation is that Jesus actually rose, right? He would say that.
Yeah, I think so. That's the traditional apologetic. Well, that's the typical apologetics response, at least in the like evangelical sphere. I actually agree with the question. I think that, well, agree with the presupposition of the question that the only way you can get to the resurrection being like the best explanation is if you start essentially from a belief
Yeah.
that the Bible is the word of God or something similar.
Actually, I've never asked Sean this question, but what you just said reminds me of the questions I love to ask is, if you only had Paul's letters, would you believe the resurrection, Sean? Oh, yeah. Christians hate that question because it forces them to say that no, all the stuff in the Bible has to be looked at like a historian rather than just saying, oh, this is God's word. So, yeah. Because if they say, yeah, Paul's enough, it really sounds like they're just believing the Bible's true and they'll just believe whatever. And you could just pull a verse out of the Gospel of John and say, I believe based on that. But if they say no, I wouldn't believe in the resurrection based on Paul's letters only, then it becomes difficult for them to say, okay, what exactly about Mark adds to the evidence? How about Matthew? What about Luke? And it's really hard for them to... I asked Jonathan that question. I don't know if you saw it on... whose channel was it? Oh, it was the Street Epistemology channel. And he said, I would not believe based on Paul's letters. I would not believe based on Paul plus Mark. But I would believe based on Paul plus Mark plus Matthew. And I asked, why? Well, because Matthew goes into more detail. I'm going... Like, people can make up more detail easily. What makes you think that it's true just based on more detail?
Yes, it's very interesting when these sort of criteria are advanced as to how it's been established that these criteria are actually relevant to the truth of the document, like that it occurred in a religious context or that it's a more detailed account or something like that. Like, well, what's the basis of that criteria?
Yeah, I'm seeing if he's got to my question yet. I'm almost back to live. Well, they're not getting a lot of questions. That just shows that there's not a lot of interest.
I noticed that you had the live view account up, which I know that you like to do. But well, one question I have is Sean has way more subscribers than you do, like 10 times or something from what you showed. Why doesn't he get more viewers on these sort of live streams?
Lack of talent.
Like, what's your opinion about that? Well, I think Sean's a pretty good communicator.
I don't know. He's still live and he's down to 46 viewers. Oh no, he just ended. Okay. He has 120,000 subs. And I have 16,000 subs and I got 268 viewers. And he never broke 140, I don't think. I think a lot of times what happens is Christians band together as a tribe and they really don't care about Sean McDowell or what he has to say, but hey, I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, here's my support.
Yeah, that was my hypothesis as well. Because what's his name? Capturing Christianity also has a large number of, I think he says like 150,000 now, but most of his videos don't get anything close to that number of views. There are a small number that do, like the some of the what is it, the not the
the
possession,
the demon possessed
what's
guy,
the word
the
I'm looking for?
Catholic
Yeah,
exorcist.
yeah. Some of those have got a lot of views. Exorcism, that's what I was looking for. Like, some of those have got a lot of views, but most of his videos don't get anywhere near that many. And I figure a lot of Christians probably just subscribe as a show of support, but they don't actually care to watch. At least that's my best explanation.
And I think they lack a sense of humor. Like, Cameron is pretty dull and boring. Sean, he's a nice guy, but he's not funny. Like, he's not entertaining. Who else? Like, yeah, guys like Braxton and Jonathan, they have about the same number of subs as me, but very rarely get a lot of views. I think I just think a lot of Christians lack a sense of humor. They're so serious about
Well,
what they believe.
well, particularly apologists. I don't want to say that this is categorically true, but I think apologetics being an intrinsically defensive enterprise about something that's supposed to be, extremely important. Maybe it's hard to do that with a kind of a tongue-in-cheek or lighthearted or comedic aspect to that. Maybe some people can, but I think that there's maybe something about the apologetic enterprise makes that difficult.
Well, yeah, no,
Certainly,
I think
watching a lot of apologists.
I think if you become entertaining and funny as an apologist, you're no longer going to be a Christian. Like if you start laughing at the concept of hell, you're out. You're no longer that type of Christian anyhow.
Hmm.
Like if you can
Yeah.
actually come out and say, yeah, it's actually pretty crazy what we believe, that Jesus is going to return to gather his flock on a white horse. Like if you can say that and laugh at yourself, I think you got one foot out the door already.
Yeah, maybe. I find the defensiveness really off-putting that they can't just. Well, I say there may be some exceptions, but so many apologists just seem to take themselves so seriously and can't just, like take a joke or be willing to say, yeah, some people think that what we believe is crazy. Whatever they can say their thing and here's what we believe. Kind of, just kind of good-naturedly responding to criticism rather than be so uptight about, oh, those atheists, oh, they're so wrong and they said these things that
Yeah.
I just find it quite annoying.
So do you do live streams?
Yeah, I do. I don't do nearly as many as you do. I have to fit it in with everything else that I try to do. But periodically, yeah, maybe like once a month or every couple of weeks.
And how many viewers do you typically get?
Depends on when I do it, because time zones are an issue for me because I'm in Australia, right? So most of my viewers are in different time zones. But I think the most I've ever gotten is about 100.
That's pretty
Usually
good.
it's less than that, maybe like 50. Yeah. I mean, I don't, especially because I don't really give any notice about when I'm going to go live. I just sort of do it when I feel like it. Often when there's a video that particularly annoys me that I want to respond to.
So what
I
sorts?
respond a lot to Cameron or Braxton, were probably the main two. Inspiring philosophy as well.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Braxton. Did you see that video he made? Well, I kind of mocked it already on my channel, but where he basically says, I'm not leaving Christianity. I'm here to tell you that I have to be diseased in the head in order for me to leave Christianity.
Yes, I did see that. That was a very odd, because in the same video he said that he's explained how his view is falsifiable and like what evidence would count against it. But at the same time, then he says that the only way he would ever leave is if he, got dementia or something like that, which seems to be saying that there's literally no even imaginable or like possible evidence that could ever convince him. So I don't quite know how you reconcile those
Yeah,
two.
I talked to him on Twitter
But
about
I think
that.
it's just a lot of chest thumping is what it came across like to me.
Yeah, on Twitter, I said, how can you say your views are falsifiable and that you're open to evidence that would change your mind? And at the same time say, I have to be sick in the head, diseased, deteriorated in order for me to leave Christianity. And then he responded on Twitter saying, well, if you think about it hard enough, you'll see that these two things are not in conflict. And then I replied, well, I would have to be diseased in the head in order for me to not to see this as a conflict.
So he didn't explain why they're not in conflict. He just said that if you think about it, you'll see. Because I have thought about it and I don't quite see. Like if there are potential reasons, then you would want to say that your belief should be responsive to those, right? Whereas he explicitly said that the only way he would change his mind is if he beliefs stopped becoming responsive to reasons. That is, he became, sick in the head sort of thing. Which seems to be saying that there's no possible. I don't know. Maybe I guess the best would be the Steelman version of what he said is to say that he's talking about that there are no reasons or like evidences in the actual world that could convince him. But there are possible reasons that could exist in like counterfactual scenarios.
Hey,
but I don't know.
Paul,
he didn't really explain that, did he?
Paul's here from Apologia. You can hop on too, and you know James Photo, right, Paul? Like I know James has said terrible things about you, Paul, but I think you guys can get along. Hop on in. No, see, it's hard for me to look at a guy like Braxton who's admitted openly that he has some mental health issues and that he deals with anxieties, and I really do think Christianity helps him with that. But it's just screaming to me that this is just fulfilling a psychological need for him.
Well, I think that that's going to be true for most people who are Christians, right? Because why else would you cling to it? Like,
Careful.
well, no, just to clarify, I don't mean to say that doesn't mean that they don't think the evidence supports it or anything like that. It's just that I think that you don't believe and practice something and defend it just because it's true. Like, I don't go on defending some series of beliefs about the prime numbers or whatever.
Right.
Like, it has to matter to you as well. So that's actually a criticism I've made of Christians before is sort of like, well, like, suppose that it's true, why should I become a Christian? Like, what is the upside? And I don't mean that in terms of like, will it make me rich or famous? I mean, like, well, will it make me a better person? Like, what is it that's good about being a Christian that contributes to the world or something like that? Like, it has to have some pull on you, I think.
I've asked a lot of Christians over the years, do you love Jesus? And the smart ones are hesitant to answer that because they know that if I say, of course I love Jesus, he saved me, he gave me a path to heaven, and he loves me and back, and it's showing that there is this psychological need there. And if they admit that, then it's, oh no, it's all about the evidence. I'm a robot, and I only look at the data and the evidence, and I've come to the very rational conclusion that Christianity is true.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. If the evidence was as strong as the apologists say that it is, there should be a bunch of people like that, right? Like, who are just convinced of it but just don't care. Because there are about lots of other things. People are like, yeah, this is true, but it doesn't bother me. I don't care about it. There are people who believe in God, for example, and don't really care. But I don't think there are many people who are very convinced by the apologetic arguments for like Christianity, but also like it will tell you that, but on the other hand, would just be like, yeah, but I don't really care about it.
Yeah, if there's
But
someone listening right now in the live stream chat who believes Christianity is true but just doesn't care about it, I would love to talk to you, because you're
particularly who believes it on the basis of arguments, right?
Yeah.
Like, thinks the evidence is strong, but just thinks it's uninteresting or not important or whatever. Because again, to emphasize, that's true for many things in life, or just aspects of reality, that you think something is true, think that there's good evidence for it, but it doesn't matter to you. It's not important.
Hey, have you?
But the fact that those go together in apologetics, I think, is telling.
Have you ever got an answer to the question of a historian that had nothing to do with Christianity becomes a historian, PhD historian in any field, looks at the evidence of the resurrection, and then becomes a Christian because of it? Have you ever?
I've never heard of an example of that, no. There are some interesting conversion cases that I'm aware of, but none that I think you can clearly be attributable to following the historical evidence.
Hey, I don't think I've ever talked to you before. Your face looks familiar to me. Caleb?
Yes, I think I did at one point. Hang on, my audio is playing.
Oh, you're playing the
something.
YouTube. Yeah. That's a rookie mistake.
Yes, there we go.
James didn't do that when he came in.
Oh yeah, he's a professional. I'll have to get to that. I'll have to get to that level at some point.
Only because I've made that mistake before.
I came on maybe like a year and a half ago. I used a different name, and I weighed like 90 pounds more than this. But
good for you.
Yeah.
How did you lose 90 pounds?
Just counting calories. People do not like to hear that, but
yeah,
that is
math works.
Yeah. If you say that, people they do not like to hear that. They want to know some fad diet or whatever. So sometimes I say intermittent fasting, because I did kind of like save my calories up till the end of the night, pig out. But I just counted the calories, and
and dieters hate intermittent fasting, like our nutritionists or whatever. People who want to help you lose weight, they hate intermittent fasting. You know why? Because you can't make money just telling people not to eat.
Right. Where's you're not really selling anything at that point. And yeah. No.
But are you a Christian?
But no.
You hesitated.
Oh no, I was like, I was very fundamentalist. I went down the whole, evangelical, became super reformed Calvinist. But I would say like 6 years ago or something. No, I'm like
Okay.
a full blown heathen.
I
Yeah,
wanted you
no.
to say that when you were a Christian, you were fat, and then when you became an atheist, you lost all the weight.
Yeah. Well, Jesus, when he was in my heart, he put on some extra pounds on the scale.
Yeah, Jesus weighs 90 pounds.
That would be some good evidence.
It seems
for
about right, because
Holy Spirit is
in
there.
first century Palestine area, men were small. Like Jesus was
He would have
probably
been 4 or 5 or something.
he was probably 4'10" and 90 pounds. Anyhow, what did you want to come on and say?
Oh, I had seen when you guys were talking about Braxton in that video, but I think that's really like the quiet part out loud, that like it really doesn't. I mean, I know we all say that, but it really has basically zero to do with apologetics. Like, I'm almost skeptical that there's even any Christians where the apologetics makes even moves the scale almost at all. That he's saying, I have confidence in this, I'm loyal to this. There's no like that he would have to go crazy
Well, no,
basically to accept any of it.
I think I disagree with you there. I think that apologetics is mainly for people who already believe, and it does increase their confidence. Wouldn't you say?
Okay. I think it helps them. Maybe it's kind of when those questions come up, when, in the back of their head, they think, oh, that doesn't sound right. I think it helps to know that there's answers. So they don't have to, they have the pre-made answers, so they don't run the risk of going out and searching for them.
Yeah.
So that they
Exactly right, because
they see the
uncertainty
actual-
makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable, and they go, oh, okay, I have this doubt, I have this question. Oh, look at Frank Turek, he answered it, and it made me feel good. I'm happy, I'm done, I don't have to look anymore.
Frank Turek was my favorite back then. I have like a signed book, but when I left, I went and talked to him and had a argument with him in a church at the mic, and
Oh, really?
and he gave me a sign.
Is it on
Yes,
YouTube?
I tried looking for it. It was at a smaller church in like Shreveport. I mean, I don't live in Shreveport, but it was in Louisiana. But it was a smaller church. He wasn't like, it wasn't a big crowd or anything, which almost made it worse because I was probably the only person there that even slightly like didn't agree with like very like fundamentalist Baptist theology. And then he's like, well, let me ask you, if Jesus was real, would you worship him? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, because he's done all these bad things. And, you can hear the old ladies gasp in the pews or whatever. But it was my uncle is a pastor, and we used to bond over apologetics. And then when I went astray, we still talk about it. But so when Frank Turek was in, he was like, okay, we got to go see Frank Turek. You got to ask him some questions so he can clear this up for you.
So was your deconversion 6 years ago very similar to me and other people, that you came to realize that the evidence wasn't sufficient for the claim?
I want to say so, but I know what, like, they would say it's because I'm gay and realized that, and so I wanted to sin. So, I mean, maybe it was that, but it seemed like it. I mean, I feel like I got really into it. Started with Kent Hovind. Like when I was like 8, we started watching Kent Hovind. I was homeschooled. That was our science classes, was
Oof.
Kent Hovind seminars. And I'm not kidding. That's how so I have notebooks and notebooks full of.
But at least he's right on the shape of the earth.
Yes, he can check that box for now. But yeah, I got really into that. And then Eric Hovind had Cy Ten Bruggencate on his show. And so I went from that straight to presuppositional apologetics. And I think that kind of, in my mind, the narrative I tell myself is that that's what got me out of it, because I got really into that. I got really reformed. I got really obsessed with that. And it made me be able to look at all the evidential things without caring if they I didn't think they mattered anymore, because I thought it was all about the presuppositions. And then I realized, yeah, this does sound kind of silly, like, except for the presuppositional argument. I was like, everything else sounds silly. And then when I realized that was silly, I was like, I'm done.
Okay, you're a gay man, you said, right?
I am. Okay. Card carrying member, yeah.
Yeah, can I see some identification? What do you think of, I made a video recently where I said I want people like Frank Turek, Sean McDowell to declare from the rooftops that if you live a gay lifestyle, that you will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. And I'm basically encouraging apologists to preach that. What do you think about me as an atheist encouraging Christians to do that?
I think it's great. I think it'll empty the pews.
This is not a setup, folks. I did not ask him to come on and
No.
say this.
No, I think that is like the same way as when you always ask people, like, why does it matter? And you try to get them to mention hell. I think it's kind of the same thing. At least with hell, it does kind of scare people into staying. But with homosexuality, I think even the hardcore right-wing guys that everybody says are so hateful, they still kind of dance around what they actually think about it, because they know that for a lot of people, especially like the young people, that is just not gonna, if they say what they really think, that is not gonna fly. I mean, at all. But
and what do you think?
So I think it's great. They should.
And what do you think about Christian apologists like Frank Turek and Sean McDowell, who I think believe that there's nothing wrong with you, Caleb, being gay, but just never ever act upon it. What do you think of that defense?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of. I mean, I say right. I'm saying right in their theology. I guess that's kind of like, I don't know, because I feel like the way he thinks about it, lust is wrong, and so being gay is a form of lust. But then I guess heterosexuality would be wrong too, unless you're lusting after your wife. I don't know, but I think they could say that a lot too, because you could just easily rephrase that and say, oh no, it's not wrong to be gay. God doesn't care if you're gay; He just wants you to be alone. Which that's a great selling point. It doesn't fit with his kind of car salesman style pitch.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow.
But,
like as a heterosexual Christian, you can say, well, I can at least someday get married and have kids and have a lifelong relationship. But no, you gays, God set it up in such a way that you can't have that, and you got to deal with it.
Right. I do think, I was talking to my aunt. So this is my uncle, his wife. So she's pastor's wife, but I said, I'd gotten to be kind of a liberal Christian. I mean, I was, so that does kind of add on to it. I thought it was okay to be gay for a short while. And she was like, what about now that you don't believe? Do you still think the Bible teaches that it's wrong? And I said, I think it does teach it's wrong, but you can explain it away as easily or easier than you can explain away slavery in the Bible. So I think that could be a useful tactic to say that, yeah, it does seem convoluted and like you're twisting things and intentionally misreading it and putting modern views on it. But that's exactly what it seems like happens with, you listen to these debates about, did the Bible endorse slavery or women in the church or anything like that. And I think it just kind of shows that, they just twisted it into a pretzel to fit about 20 to 30 years behind the culture constantly.
The fact that the Bible is so thoroughly unimpressive as a moral document, I think is a strong evidence against it being, like authoritatively, divinely inspired. But if you think about what it could have taught and how it could have elevated mankind for thousands of years and what it actually did.
But it gave great rules on how to treat your slaves, James.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, you could say, well, it was a bit ahead of the time in some things, maybe. Like, that's the best you could say. It's interesting to me because this comes up a lot when you ask Christians or apologists about, like, well, if the omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent God of the universe wanted to communicate to mankind or wanted to create a universe or wanted to reveal himself or whatever, why did he come up with this? Like this convoluted kind of pretty lame equivocal mess of like the Bible or of the resurrection or like whatever it is in particular, or just creating the earth as it is. It's always really just very unimpressive. It's like the God who never shows up, who never actually does a good job or really seems to make the effort. I just find it incredibly lame, the kind of God that they're willing to defend.
And that's why Tyler Vela left Christianity, is because the God that never shows up. And he goes, maybe he's not there, or maybe this version of God's not there.
Mm-hmm. I think they having it lag like that too. It's not like, I think a lot of, especially evangelicals, like to think that Jesus flies up into heaven and all the doctrines are the same until about 20 years ago, and now everything started changing and people have started liberalizing it. When it's really taken 2,000 years to get to the understanding that even a conservative evangelical has is just so far removed from what would have been the view of, especially on like social issues, I'm sure, of the church back then. But and it just seems like she said something about the fundamentals. She was like, well, people can question certain things, but there's certain fundamentals that they have to believe, and they have a statement of faith on their church's website. And I was like, wouldn't it be a lot simpler if God had just put that in the back of the New Testament, like your statement of faith, if that's what it was supposed to be? Like, why did somebody have to carve that out of the Bible instead of having, like, you know, Paul, right, here are the fundamentals, step 1, step 2, step 3. But
what they often say is that it is in the Bible. You just have to kind of, look for it and put it together.
You just got to read it like me. Man has fallen. Our reasoning, we can't trust our own reasoning. Of course it's there. It's clear.
Hey,
But that's the thing. Like, okay, so God wanted to teach us these profound, essential truths for our salvation. But couldn't he have done it a bit better? Like, surely God could have communicated himself in a way where it was just unequivocal what his teaching was about these important issues, and that no sane person could read the New Testament and have a different opinion about it. Whereas, in fact, that we have people through thousands of years who are apparently very learned and earnest, who disagree profoundly about what the Bible says about all of these sorts of things. It seems that God's just not a very good communicator. Like, really, this is the best he could do to communicate these essential truths to mankind? That hard to swallow.
I think that's where they get the most. I kind of think they have the most pushback on issues where it actually kind of bothers them that there's like a new modern moral question that God, in his, tome that's supposed to encapsulate everything, did not mention. Even like abortion, they can read into it and make a good or bad argument about it, but it does seem like God, when he was writing it, was not fully aware of the process of reproduction and how it worked. And that now there's somehow moral significance. The soul comes in right when there's unique DNA that somehow
God could have said that. God could have said exactly. God could have said that there's an egg and a sperm, and they fertilize together, and that when that happens, the soul enters the body, and that's the point at which it becomes a person, and therefore abortion is wrong. It could have said that in like 2 sentences, and that would be clear, right? But I guess he
but
decided
God uses
it was better
the knowledge
to
of the
not say that.
day. He just nudges forward slowly.
That's what I mean. Because that's how apparently he works. He looks a lot like a God who's not actually real. That's sort of my problem.
That goes with they'll say that about slavery and things like that, and I say, okay, well, with gay marriage, you could say that about, he just uses the knowledge of the day. That's how they were working on, which they hate that. That's cultural relativism, and then nothing's true, and then we won't have anything, and no standards, no society or anything if we do that. Transgender issues are another one that it just seems like, regardless of how you actually think it should be handled, we know that this is like a fact of human existence that does not seem to be addressed, that there's any understanding of so now it's that God, whatever set of chromosomes you have, that is what God intended for you to live, which is just, he could have said that too, but but it just isn't.
There's a guy in the live stream named Japheth who I've talked to many times, probably too many times, and he said this guy named Tyler Vela, which Braxton had a meltdown over, presup Christian who's now a non-Christian, he says Tyler Vela had no relationship with God. He has a horrible understanding of God. I mean, Japheth, we can say that about you.
Jesus,
when you leave Christianity 5 years from now, looking back. But what were we going to say, Caleb?
Well, Jesus left him on red, so yeah, he didn't feel the same way about him. So
what
he wasn't picking up his calls.
7 years ago, and I pretend you're you 7 years ago, and I ask you, who is God, who is Jesus? Describe them to me. What would you say?
I would say God is the foundation of being. He's, our foundations of logic and reason and morality. He created everything and sustains everything. And Jesus is his incarnation that comes to, pay the price for the sins that we're born into sin. We're so disgusting and horrible and awful. But Jesus, in his infinite mercy, came down and became flesh and humbled himself and died. And now all you have to do is, accept him or accept what he did, trust and believe, and then his righteousness will be given to you, and then you can live.
See, and I think this Japheth guy who claims to be a Christian would agree with you. But I just had an idea for a channel for you. You got your own YouTube channel, Caleb?
Yes, I've flirted in my head with the idea of like posting stuff, but I don't know.
Because I got an idea for you. Now it's a little risque, and you might not like me for saying this, but you don't have that stereotype of gay men with the lisp, that.
See, I feel like I can kind of hear it in myself, but people don't. Maybe it depends on if I'm around other gay people. It definitely
you
comes
don't
out.
you don't have that, but that stereotype is out there. If you can pretend to like just fit the mold of a gay stereotypical man, and then be a Christian presup and say what you said, God is the preconditions. I mean, it'd be hilarious.
Oh, I've got it. That would be great.
Darth Dawkins would
Jesus,
know what to
he's
do.
fabulous.
Well, God works through the weak and frail, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, that'd be comedic gold, I think.
That would be hilarious. I mean, I thought about that. It was so looking back. I mean, I say like 6 or 7 years ago, but that's really when I kind of like hardcore like realized I was an atheist as opposed to just like forgetting all of it. But I went through a phase where I was very like Christian. I was still like an evangelical, thought the Bible was the literal word of God, but then I had found there's a guy, Matthew Vines, is a evangelical Christian, but he's gay, and he's got a book about how you can reread these verses and how it's okay to be gay. So I was like a Seidenberg and K obsessed, went from him to Greg Bonson, like these serious, intense people. And I was still, but I thought it was totally okay to be gay, probably because my sin had deceived me. But, I was hardcore Calvinist. Like I'd say I leaned closer to like the Westboro Baptist Church than like my Baptist church that I went to in my views, but I still thought it was okay to be.
So what would a guy like you 7 years ago think about a guy like me? Like, some of my content.
I don't know, because I want to say, like, I remember Matt Dillahunty, when I watched him, I thought he was, I won't say I was actually making like a supernatural claim about it, but I just thought when I looked at him that I just saw evil. Like I thought I could just see it in his face. I don't know that I would actually have said, oh, he's demon possessed, because I didn't come from as much of a charismatic background that would have just thought there was actually an entity there doing it.
You're right.
But with you,
no, I get that.
I probably would have thought you were even worse. Like I would have thought you were more nefarious, because at least Matt, I would have said that you're like sneaky like a serpent, because at least he was like out there open about it. The trick questions and the poof or drown, like pitting people against their creator, like
Yeah, who was it?
Like
Rebecca from Bread of Life. She just came out and said that I am of Satan, or yeah.
Well, you must be doing something right.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing that I don't think a lot of people that watch apologetics realize, is even when I thought that about Matt Dillahunty, I really had not consumed a lot of his content when it wasn't being commentated on by a Christian. And I think that goes with most subjects like evolution and any of the apologetics. A lot of them have not seen the opposing view, except for the sound bites that Frank Turk will pull some quote from.
But do you think that's true today, like 7 years later?
I know with the people like my uncle that's very evangelical. He'll say things like, he's seen a quote from Dan Dennett that Frank Turek will say, and then he'll say, Dan Dennett says, if you're an atheist, you can't have rationality or reason, because there's some quote that says there's no free will, and if there's no free will, you can't reason, and so they have this whole list of things they think that all these atheists believe, and that none of them are actually what they believe. They're like characters of it, kind of like how William Lane Craig will quote mine physicists about the Big Bang to support the cosmological argument. I think that goes with everything, like biblical scholarship, like all those areas. They just have such a weird framing of it that, like, I don't think they could really say back the best. I don't think they could steel man the other side very easily.
Yeah.
Like,
but it's just hard to believe that if you're interested in apologetics, if you're interested in Christianity, that you would at least say, hey, maybe I should ask the question, why don't other people believe this, and start listening to atheists. But they don't, I guess.
Well, in my experience, very few people actually ask that question, not just about religion, but about pretty much anything. That's a big bugbear of mine, that people just aren't sufficiently intellectually open about, differences of belief. But the other thing is that there are some apologists, and I know William Lane Craig is one of them. I don't want to say all apologists, but definitely some explicitly tell Christians to not engage with atheist or kind of Christian literature because it's misleading and a waste of time. Effectively.
Stop listening to atheist YouTubers.
Oh, PineCreek has changed.
Yes.
That was my clip. Have you ever seen that clip, that soundbite? When you said some Christians say don't listen to atheist YouTubers? Well, that's a clip of Testify saying exactly that. Especially if you're doubting,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. That was one thing that Cy, Timberg, and Kate, that was one of his selling points of presup, is that once you, I can't remember the exact quote, but he was saying now that we know that, you know, even logic itself is founded on God, you can watch these atheists and you can read this stuff because you just can see that they're obviously they're borrowing from our worldview to even, you know, make the argument. But I guess he was wrong because once I started reading them, it went away. But he, you know, and I have messages from back then when I was a little bit younger, where I was asking about, you know, he has God as the foundation of, you know, whatever. But I was like, how do we know it's these 66 books? Because now you're putting your presupposition not in the Bible, but in the early church that had compiled the correct version of the Bible. And I ended up messaging. He didn't give me that good of an answer, and I was like distraught over it. And I ended up emailing Todd Friel. That was probably my favorite guy at the time.
Oh, really?
I watched all of Wretched, like his show, and I emailed him about it. This all these questions about how the canon was put together, and aren't we? You know, we constantly say our faith is on the Bible, but isn't our faith more in church tradition? If we're like having faith that we got the right 66, he straight up told me maybe I should take a break from looking into this. So I mean,
wow,
I've got to find that email, and that bothered me. I remember. I just kind of I
Do you have that
basically
email?
followed his advice, and I'm sure I do in some old email. I'll have to
but you're not in front. You don't have that email account right in front of you.
No,
I'd love
have to
see that.
I'll have to look for it because I was
Christian apologist.
I mean, I was very bothered by it.
Don't investigate any further for now.
Well, I'm sure he thought that I was, you know.
Does that surprise you, PineCreek? Because that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I assume that they say that probably all the time to people who are asking.
It surprised me a little bit that they would do it in text where it can be shown to the public. I mean, because you're admitting that you gotta stay in your bubble.
Well, I think in their minds they're thinking of it like if I had a friend that was asking me questions about the flat Earth, and was saying, well, what about this, and what about this video, and what about you know they're just saying things that don't make sense and pulling together random information. I could see myself saying maybe okay, maybe take a break from the flat Earth stuff and just spend some time reading about normal astronomy or something. I could see myself saying that, and in his view, that's 1,000 times worse than thinking the Earth is flat because the consequences are so much higher. So I could see why he would say that, but it also was clear to me that he would not have said that if he had a very on every other issue. It felt like they had such a good canned response that put me at ease, where you say, okay, I got it. I know but not when it came to the actual why we I get why they think some of the Bible's true. They'll say, oh, there's this thing that says some science thing we didn't know, or however they want to. There's wisdom in here that they couldn't have known, but that doesn't account for all 66 books. So I would ask well, how do we know that, the book of James, just James, everything else will just have, 65 books. How do we know James wasn't supposed to be in there? And then they either have to say,
it almost wasn't.
A lot of times they'll say, right. That's why I use that one is, I knew that Martin Luther, I think had, maybe I'm misremembering that, but there was some debate about that in the Reformation and stuff, but they'll end up saying things well, you wouldn't lose anything theologically if you took it out. And then so now you're basically put in a position where you have to say that parts of this book you could do without, but they don't want to say that. So it's just kind of pulls all these intuitions together, and it just.
Hey, James, I was going to ask you, have you ever talked to Sean McDowell?
No, I haven't really interacted directly with, I guess a few. I've interacted with Inspiring Philosophy and Braxton, but never Sean McDowell, no.
Oh, you've interacted with Braxton?
Yes, he did a response to one of my videos and sent me a message about it. It was a bit strange, actually. He sent me a message saying, "Oh, I've done a response to your video, and here's what I'm going to talk about." And then I said, "Oh, well, do you want to like have a discussion or debate or something like that?" And he basically said, "No, I'm too busy." I was like, "Oh, okay." I don't know why he even messaged me about it, but yeah, whatever. Well, that's my limited interaction with Braxton.
Because I think Sean McDowell would. You're the type of guy he would allow on his show.
Well, I'm open to interacting with pretty much anyone who's willing to have a discussion.
He wouldn't allow
But,
me,
you know,
because I'm like,
Well, no.
it's like inviting the devil on. Like,
You're the serpent. You're the wolf in
exactly.
sheep's clothing. No, yeah, but I think the way you do it is great. Like who was it that said it's like you go in with a scalpel and you just know how to like pick it all apart just perfectly with those questions. Like, I just imagine people like staring at their ceiling the next.
Well, you know what the
that
key
night
is?
and just
The key is to hear false information and not let it bother you. That's the key to having good conversations. Because when I'm talking to theists, they will say a litany of things that I could, like, a lot of historians would say, well, that's not true or not quite true, and this is flat out false. You got to be able to hear all that misinformation and just let it go, and then get to what the root is.
I think that's. I thought about doing that with politics the other day because I can do it. You know, I grew up being way more extreme than even most evangelicals, so it doesn't bother me when I hear I hear atheists or like just non-religious people say, "Oh my God, can you believe that he thinks I'm going to hell?" And I'm thinking like, yeah, I thought basically everybody was going to hell, but I thought about just intentionally watching like politics that I like strongly disagree with and trying to like practice like remaining calm and not becoming the like crazy like red faced like screaming liberal or whatever, which I don't think I'm that bad at it, but I thought about just doing that intentionally, so it doesn't bother me with the apologists. But
like James is probably the best out of us three. Like, you can hear false information and you can just be stoic about it, right?
Yes, although if I'm just sort of listening to like a lot of apologetics videos by myself, I often just find it really annoying to listen to. But yeah, I don't like get angry, or particularly if it's like if I'm having a discussion with someone. I don't know. It doesn't really bother me. It's like, well, let's talk about it. Let's explore it.
Yeah.
I don't get the whole thing about getting angry or offended if they're saying you're going to hell or whatever else. It's like, well, you know, that's just what they're saying. Like,
right.
Who cares? I'd rather them be honest.
It bothers them to, yes, and I think being calm like that, and like I think it bothers them, like people like I say like me. I'm not meaning that like bragging, but you know, when I talk to some regular Christian, you know, on the street, I'm sure that I can say I probably know more about it than they do, just from how into it I was then and how I'm still interested in it. And I think that causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, where I'm not arguing the specifics of what's true and not true, but that they can tell that I know what they're saying, I know their arguments, I know the good points, I've read the Bible, but that I don't believe it. I think they want to comfort themselves by saying, if only he knew, if only he had heard that sermon or had read that book or had seen what this person said. And to hear somebody repeat back their argument and not be convinced, like, I think that, like, looking back, that probably would have made me like.
And this is what makes street epistemology so effective as a dialectic approach, is because when people feel understood, they're more likely to now listen to what you have to say. And that's why it's so important to constantly repeat back to people what they've just said. The thing is, I can't help myself sometimes. Like, I'll repeat back to what they said, but in a very rhetorically bad sounding way. But it's still technically true.
It's tempting. It's I think also a lot of the anger from a lot of atheists, or even just like, I say left leaning, not to disclude you, Doug, but I think, like, you know, I live in Texas in a smallish town. So if I got mad because people disagreed with me, I'm gay, I'm vegan, I'm a liberal. Like, I mean, if I got mad, I would just never leave my house. So, you know, I can just assume that basically everybody that I meet is going to have some view on something that would enrage me. So I'm gonna have to get past that.
You probably should go into politics on your channel a little bit, because you have the type of personality type that's attractive, that people are not going to get their defenses up. And like, you're the opposite of me in so many different ways, but we're having a very calm, civil
The
conversation.
anti-Doug, yes.
Yeah, you're the anti-Doug.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we got one
Yeah,
thing
I'm
in common,
definitely
I guess, that we're atheists. Or do you call yourself an atheist?
Yes. Yeah, no, and I got pretty hardcore there for a while. Like I would say I just like Christopher Hitchens, like, I mean, I got very, like, I went, it was like an on-off switch. I went from,
Why didn't
hardcore
you
believer
become
to
a
just
progressive
hardcore.
Christian for like a little bit?
I did for like a week, but I think that's the problem, is once you like let your views sift through stuff, it just kind of all falls out. Like, I mean, there's nothing tangible to hold on to. Like once you,
Jesus is what you hold on to.
I mean, then
the idea
that
of
just
Jesus.
like it all. I say I was an atheist for like 6 years, but really for a few years before that, I didn't look into it, but I kind of in the back of my head thought, yeah, if I looked into this, it'd probably be wrong. And then it dawned on me when I was like 20, 21 or something. It dawned on me a few years later. I was like, that's the same as already thinking it's wrong. Like, to think that if you looked into it, you'd find out it's wrong is the same as already not believing it. So,
well, this question's for both of you.
yeah, I've always.
How do you think guys like Randall Rouser? Do you know who that is, Caleb? I know James does.
I've seen him. I've only seen what like clips that I've seen on like your channel. I haven't read or watched any of his stuff. But
like people like Randall Rouser, even Dale Allison. How do those guys? I would consider them progressive type Christians, whatever that means. They're definitely not, like Sean McDowell or Braxton Hunter. How do they remain Christians?
I think so. I almost started writing about this. I think so much, like, we underestimate how much it's not just the beliefs, but like the structure of the world, the way it works in their head is just so different. I don't mean it as like a pathology or anything, but I just think it's so different the way you move throughout the world as like a really religious person. Like, basically thinking you constantly have an audience, like your thoughts are monitored, by either God and the devil, and there can be thoughts from the demons and the devil. And there's like all these different, I think it just adds up to where there's just way more than just the specific beliefs. Like just the, did Jesus bodily rise from the dead is one thing, but is there like the whole model that you have of the world, I think is deeper than any like specific doctrine that they can like change on. I don't know.
What do you think, James?
I think it's a combination of the fact that they like being Christians. They find that satisfying and, I guess, a helpful way to view the world. And also that the kind of intellectual dogmatism or resistance to like nuance or doubt or uncertainty that characterizes like like more evangelical types, that just doesn't really bother them. Like if you raise an issue that, maybe there's statements in the Bible that are not completely factually correct or something like that. They're just like, yeah, I guess so. Because I don't know specifically about like Randall Rouser or others, but other progressive Christians that I do know, they just don't really care about that sort of thing very much. It's not what's foundational to their faith. That plus they like being a Christian. I think that many of the things that seem to get evangelicals so worked up just aren't really that important to them.
Well, I actually have the right answer in this envelope here. Randall Rouser is still Christian because he saw the devil.
Really? Is that what he says?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
Well, he doesn't say I'm Christian because I saw the devil, but these are experiences, and Dale Allison said the same thing.
Yeah.
They've had experiences in their life that they can't explain away, and the best explanation to them is their religion is true.
I think it's like they gave themselves a bigger sandbox to play in, because they can search search out new information and change, but they're still in the sandbox. They're still like they've set up their guardrails, made them wider than everybody else's, because they realize if it gets too rigid, it's going to shatter. But they still want to be in that playground with those ideas. And I don't know with them because I'm sure they've thought about it, but I know some progressive Christians. I think there's maybe if they looked into like other religions, I think there's a lot of times they experience things and they think that the only time you can experience that is through Christianity, like some whether it's like a worship experience or just good things happening or forgiveness or some personal development, and they just aren't realizing that that's like universal to every religion and not having a religion, and that like the experiences that they have in church are just as meaningful as like a Muslim or a Buddhist or Hindu. Like they'll say that to sound like like they're making everybody equal, but I feel like in the back of their head they feel like, well, no, but theirs are wrong, like mine's the real one. Like they're all kind of similar, but I've got the brand name version. like I don't know.
Well, I think I'm going to let you guys go because you're both too smart and both too good looking, and you're causing the Christians to be scared. So go check out James' YouTube channel. It's called James is the Best. Well, what's it called?
It's just called James Fodor, my name.
Oh, sorry, I got it wrong. Whenever I look for you, I go, James is the best.
Oh, I listen to you and Nathan and Doug. Like I just have y'all in the background on like 2x speed throughout the day
You listen to Nathan?
quite often, so it's weird. Oh yeah, so I end up like you sound almost inebriated by not being at 2x speed, both of you. I'm just used to your voices being much more fast. But well, I guess I will.
Well, nice meeting you, Caleb. And you said you do have a channel. Do you want to say what you're?
I don't yet. I mean, I have an account on YouTube. I mean, I have like a Twitter.
You don't have. Okay.
But,
You're not trying to. Okay.
Not quite. Maybe I'll look for a shout out if I get the gonads for it to do that. But
okay, and take my thing seriously. The comedy thing would be like the stereotypical gay man doing presup.
I could see that. I could almost, I could exploit myself for some good use. Like I feel like, yes. Oh, I could do it. Like,
can you ground your morality?
Oh my god, I could do drag. I could do like apologetics and drag. Like, can you imagine?
I want a 7% finder's fee though. Okay, see you guys.
Yeah, I'll have to include you in it. See ya.
Thanks, Doug.
Yep. I think that's a great idea. So the room is open for the theists. You don't have to be scared of those good-looking, highly intelligent men who are in here. Or you can just ask me questions in the live stream chat. The title of this is, Are Christians Losing Hope? If you're a Christian and you're losing hope, if you're having doubts, call in. Maybe I can help. If you're not losing hope, if you have zero doubts and you're a Christian listening, call in. Maybe I can put a pebble in your shoe, or maybe you can put a pebble in mine. I welcome pebbles. Pebbles are beautiful. Pebbles are fine. If I knew 2 more lines, I could make a rhyme. I'm glad I'm funny because I'm always around to make myself laugh. Chris Korn, stop it. Stop it. I really hope that Christians are losing hope. I hope they stop and go away soon too. Alice, Dean, show me on the doll where the Christian hurt you. Actually, maybe not. Invite on Cameron Bertuzzi to compare your conversion to Catholicism stories. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think even if I did become Catholic, Cameron Bertuzzi would still hate me. Someone linked me to PineCreek merch. I want a t-shirt. Oh. You greedy, capitalistic, consumeristic pigs. No. I'm a social liberal guy. No, I'm kidding. If I was a real capitalist like I say I am, yeah, I would have merch, wouldn't I? Poofer Drown shirts. Flying Man shirts. I think you're good looking for a slightly older than me guy. However, keep up this excellent show. Love your work. Thank you. Well, you know, older men have a lot of advantages over those youngsters. Wet napkin shirts, yeah. Light my wet napkin. Yeah, that most people think that's a euphemism, but I'm being literal. Wet, light my wet napkin. Capturing Christianity, Cameron Catholic, yeah. I wonder how much merch Paul sells on Apologia. Paul, are you still here? Are you doing work and listening to me in the background? How much money do you make from merch? Tell the world. Please school Kenny on chemistry? What did he say wrong about chemistry? What line of work do you do? I'm a financial analyst. I work with spreadsheets mostly. I'm here to lead you to hell shirts, yeah. Or may I lead you to hell? Question mark. Got to be polite. Have you guys done a lot of your Christmas shopping today on Black Friday? My wife wanted furniture. Am I the only man out there who hates furniture? I mean, buying furniture. If I had my way, all furniture would be blow up. Like you got a blow up table, blow up chairs, blow up bed, That way, if you need to make a quick getaway, you just deflate and run. I hate heavy furniture. I like a house. I like a lighthouse. Not a lighthouse on the water, but a light house. A house that's not heavy. I like to see every corner of the room. Because, you know, as an employee of Satan, I know that that's where demons hide, is in the corners, in the closets. You keep everything empty and clean, they have nowhere to hide. If you didn't come from a Christian background, would resurrection, flaming napkin, or Jesus saves on the moon still carry the same weight in your credulity of Jesus Yahweh? I think so. Like, I don't care how you were raised, Christian or not, Muslim or not, whatever. You see stuff like that, I think it changes your life. If you see someone who you know has been dead for years, someone says a little prayer and they immediately come up through the ground bubbling, you're seriously going to tell me that you're not going to do a double take and your whole worldview is going to be shattered if you're a naturalist going in? I do not think atheists should shy away from that type of evidence as a marker of what they would change their mind. You should welcome it. This is why I don't like it when Matt Dillahunty gives the cop-out answer. I don't know what would convince me, but God does. Now, technically, he's right if this God exists, but give some examples. Throw something out that might move the needle. But God isn't a vending machine, though. Well, but he did give out some free Cokes in the Old Testament. He did give out some Snicker bars in the New Testament. God did do some vending. He did interact, intercede, intervene in the Bible. Why not today? But he does, Doug. He does intervene today. Oh, he does. Like cancer remission, back pain, just feeling better, feeling the comfort. No, I want to see water light on fire. I want to see people coming back from the dead. I want to see amputees get their limbs back. What would PineCreek's presidential campaign slogan be? It's your fault. No. The slogan would be, it's my fault. Oh, that would be a great t-shirt. It's my fault. President who's for personal responsibility. America, stop being so needy. Yeah, that'd be a second place t-shirt, Fred Harvey. I've always said that 1 Kings 18 is a good way, but people think it's bad to challenge God, even though it's the exact message of the text. Yes, Johann Pretorius. You're right. It's exactly the purpose of why it was done in 1 Kings 18. Just asking for it to be repeated. Be dead inside. That's another good t-shirt. Yep. Although that triggers a lot of people. So you got to soften it up a bit and say, be deader inside. Oh, hey guys, guess what? I watched What is a Woman yesterday. With the whole family. They had already seen it and I hadn't seen it yet. So we watched it as a whole family. That was our Thanksgiving movie. What is a woman? I laughed so loud on one part. Martha V, thanks for your work, Doug. Well, thank you, Martha. I will take that $20 and I will spend it at the Outback Steakhouse in about 2 hours. I will say to my kids, this thunder from down under is from Martha. Jesus was against that. He said, don't test the Lord your God. Yeah. And then Jesus also said, you'll do greater things I did, which is testing the Lord your God through miracles. Zeleny. I thought Canadian Thanksgiving was in October. It was in October. But I, as a Canadian citizen and U.S. resident, celebrate 2 Thanksgivings because I am way more thankful than you guys are. I'm way more grateful than you guys are. I do it twice a year. But there's a scene in What is a Woman where Matt Walsh asks this old guy, no, you can't say that because if you say that, you'll hurt people's feelings. And this old guy says, I'm old. I don't care about people's feelings. It just reminded me of me. I should have clipped that. I wonder if I'll get a copyright strike if I clip that. I'm old. I don't care about people's feelings. And there's truth in that. The older you get, the less you care about people's feelings. Doug would have Taylor Swift playing when he walks on stage. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Yes, I'm going to go see Taylor Swift in 3 months, 4 months. That should be fun. Taking my teenage daughter and 2 other teenagers. I was offered $1,000 for my tickets each, and I paid $250. And I turned it down. That's how much I love my daughter. Because she would cry and cry and cry. And I said, but look, here's $750 profit for you, my daughter. I don't want money, I want Taylor. Yes, that's true love. How many of you parents out there would love their children so much that you wouldn't sacrifice those tickets for $750 profit? I think I could probably get more. Question is, at what level would I stop loving my daughter when it comes to these tickets? If someone offered me $10,000 per ticket, would I think I have to turn in my great dad card in at that point. Definitely $1 million. Like, my daughter will get over it for $1 million. 10,000, I think, is like, okay. It is you.
The one and only.
I got your email. Haven't read it, if that's what you're asking.
Oh no, I wasn't going to ask.
Okay.
No. But yeah, since you mentioned it. Well, you could always just, give it to your wife and say, hey, check this out. Give me an analysis on it, right?
You know, you asking me to read your book is like me asking you to read a tutorial on how to use Microsoft Excel.
I don't think so.
Sure,
I don't think
it's the same thing.
That's not
Actually, mine's more useful.
Let me ask you as an atheist. I want to ask you a question. As an atheist, how do you feel about, now you say you celebrate Thanksgiving, right?
Yep.
How do you feel about that? I mean, is that not an awkward thing for you? Like, let's say you sit at the Thanksgiving table with the family and they're like, let's pray, right?
I know I don't say let's pray.
So are you like, during the prayer, are you like, no, 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 no? Are you like resisting the prayer? Or are you like saying, no, I'm a naturalist, I love trees, or whatever? Is there like something in you that, I mean, do you go out in the woods on Thanksgiving?
I like trees.
No, listen, you get out of the woods on Thanksgiving and say, thank you. I mean, who do you thank is what I'm trying to say. I mean, it's the day of thankfulness, right? So
yeah, you can thank
you
your family,
in the
thank your
woods on your back and
spouse.
say, thank you, nature.
But you can have a general sense of thankfulness, even though there's not an agent of mind to thank, right? You can just be thankful that, you didn't die from a car crash last night. Like,
well, I mean, don't you think that true Thanksgiving would have to be reciprocated? Don't you think there'd have to be a source to thank, right? Not just necessarily happenstance.
So I thank the farmers who provide my food that I eat. I thank the truck drivers who take the food from the farmers and deliver it to the store. I thank the store clerks who actually spend hours in their day.
Right. So you need a day for that, right? You need a specific day for that.
No, I do it all the time.
So do you call them up and stuff? Or do you call up the local farmers and tell them?
In my heart, Kenny, I thank them. That's not good enough to thank people in their hearts.
That is so funny.
It's so true, right? Gotcha.
Yeah, you know where I'm going.
But when we celebrated Thanksgiving yesterday, it was just me and my wife and my 2 kids. All of my extended family's in Canada. Yeah,
so she don't still pray over the meal like on Thanksgiving. There's no.
She used to, but actually yesterday I don't think she did. I think I'm rubbing off on her.
Uh-oh. You're gonna have to give me her email or something. I'm gonna have to get this going.
Because once you stop praying in Thanksgiving, it's pretty much over, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like the beginning of it. That's the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
So what it kind of scares me, the conversation you were having earlier. So am I gonna turn this on one day and find that you have homosexual Christians on your broadcast now?
Well, what did I say? What are you talking about, homosexual Christians? There's no such thing.
I like that. I like that answer. That's kind of what yeah. So there's that. Yeah, there's that calling.
No, but seriously, what are you talking about? What scared you?
No, I heard the guy on there talking about he found somebody online that was an evangelical Christian who claimed to be a homosexual, and the conversation was somewhat.
Will you disagree with that? You can't be a Christian and be a homosexual?
Oh, absolutely, I disagree with that. Yeah.
Can you be a Christian and be a heterosexual?
Sure.
What's the difference?
But that's the design, right? So now I'm not going to get into all this, but because as well as I do, that there's a natural order of things, right? Procreation.
Do you know there's a difference between being and acting?
Listen, there's a natural order of procreation. Here's the thought.
Kenny, listen to me. Is there a difference between being a homosexual and acting like one?
I don't think so.
Really?
No. As far as how that's carried out, maybe disease-wise, or maybe some other.
Can you be a heterosexual and celibate?
A heterosexual and celibate?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you be homosexual and celibate?
You could be celibate from the act, but if you have it in your heart, then that's where the sin is, right? Because
why didn't you give that answer with the heterosexual?
What's the same answer? If a heterosexual is lusting, they're also guilty, right? Because adultery and fornication is in the heart, not necessarily carried out in the action.
Okay, but what's the difference between a homosexual lusting and a heterosexual lusting? They're the same sin, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, but so if a fornicator, right, an adulterer, an effeminate, you know what it says in the book. None of these shall inherit the kingdom of God.
Right, but that's the act. If they act that way, they will not inherit the kingdom of heaven.
Well, now let's see what Jesus said about that. Right? You know what he said about it. That you've heard that it was said, he that do not commit adultery, but I tell you that if you shall look after a woman to lust after her, you've committed adultery with her already.
And you ask for forgiveness, and it's okay.
So, well, that sounds pretty easy going, doesn't it? Easy believism.
Well, you know as well as I do, most Christians lust in their heart.
Well, I would say this. I would say that if that's the case, then I guess I would say this. It depends on. Well, I'm not going to get into all that because that just goes off into different.
If Christians can lust in their heart and still be Christians, why couldn't homosexuals lust in their heart and still be homosexuals?
Well, I would say that a Christian shouldn't be lusting in their heart. That would be my answer.
Yeah, but should is not the thing. If Christians actually lust in their hearts and they still are actually Christians,
if they go in the flesh, if they go into the flesh, and they commit a sin, like entertain a thought or even carry out the action, yes, they can be forgiven. Homosexuals can be forgiven, but they are also going to need to be transformed from the lifestyle. So there's got to be a new life.
But if you're a homosexual celibate, there is no lifestyle.
God's going to set them right naturally because it's out of the natural order of things. So here's a thought experiment. If you would put 100, let's say 100 homosexuals or 100 lesbians on a deserted island, right? Mm-hmm. And how long would that race or that kind or whatever you want to call it, that group of people survive? Yeah. Because that is out of the natural order of things. So God has set things in a certain order. Everything outside of that certain order.
If God sets things in a certain order, then why are there homosexuals?
Because homosexual, that's actual part of the fall,
right?
The sin, right, that is entered. The
sin. But God set that sin in order.
But Satan has set out to pervert everything.
Oh, so it's Satan's fault that there's homosexuals.
Everything that God has made, every structure, every order, whether it be marriage, whether it be homosexuality, whatever might be the case, it's just an upside down topsy-turvy of what God has put in place. So sin is really the transgression of the natural order of things.
Right, but that also applies to heterosexuals who sin and have lustful thoughts and fornicate.
does.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why you're singling
And they're
out homosexuality as
Well, homosexuality is a spiritual bondage that's deeper in the sense that there is a natural order of attraction between a man and woman, right? There's a natural order of that. So, before
not
you
for
get
some
married,
people.
well, that's because but that's because something's askew in there. If that's not the case, let's face it,
Something's askew in there.
something's askew. That's a nice way of putting it.
Do you think homosexuals are born or
No, I do not.
You don't?
No.
Have you ever
No,
seen
I've
a
talked
dog
about
hump another dog that are both male dogs?
I've talked to you about that before.
Yeah, like how do you explain the homosexual behavior in animals then?
I don't know. I've never been in the dog community to know what's exactly going on there. So
Sheep and goats
I
and
can't answer that question.
cows even.
Only thing I can figure is maybe they were just a little bit in overdrive and just had to have somewhere to relieve themselves. I don't know. You tell me. Well, I can't say that anyone could answer that question.
Maybe we evolved that way.
Evolved that way? Well, if we evolve that way, then we're evolving in reverse, right? So we're going backwards.
No. Like there's an evolutionary story of why homosexuality exists, and that is, I think we did talk about this once. That the hunters would go out and start hunting, and they didn't have to worry about the gay guy left behind to help the women because he's gay. He's not going to go after their wife, and so it actually helped the community because the women needed a stronger human there to lift things and do things, and so it was a way for society and community to get stronger. If you have like 5 to 7% of the community gay, it actually helps the community. It's same with women. Like if you're in an office, they've done studies on this. If you're in an office and you got all men, it's not as productive if you have like 4 men and 1 woman.
That's the most nonsensical thing I think.
But if
I've
you have
ever
5 women, then it's chaos. Anyhow, I got 3 other people who want on.
Oh man, I was hoping to get into
the word.
Resurrection a little bit, yeah. But
Well, what do you want to say about the resurrection? Because it didn't
no,
happen.
it would be too time consuming.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just got to ask yourself the what's more likely question, and then you're done with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do have a good point about the resurrection, but it's going to take a little bit of exegesis, and then so we can do that maybe some other time.
Okay.
Whenever you're going to be on next.
Yeah, if it's
in between now and when you read the book, and I come back on, then we'll talk about it.
I have a feeling if you got into it, it'd be way too long.
That's why I wanted to send you the book, because I thought, well, maybe he'll feel all the story and he'll feel bad that I actually sent him one, and then he'll feel guilty for not reading it. Well, this guy did send me a book, so yeah, but it didn't work. So
Okay, well, have a good Thanksgiving.
all right, we'll see you.
Man of Steel. Oh, I know this guy, or I know a little bit. Hey, Timothy.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I see you talked to our friend Trey. What's his name?
Oh,
Trey
Jadlow.
Yeah.
I guess that's how I pronounce it. Yeah. The conversation, I think I spent about the first half of it chastising him for his toxic behavior on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is the most toxic thing he does?
Well, I'm not sure. One of the things he does is he pisses people off, and then when they decide not to talk to him, he says that they're running away, and pats himself on the back for it. Like, they decide not to debate him because it's their fault in his mind, and he pats himself on the back for it.
But
like he won something.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me. Like I'm okay with that if he thinks he won, and if he. So when he says, "Doug, you just ran away from me," I say, "Okay, yes." I slaughtered you, Doug. Okay, yes. It doesn't make a difference.
No, I went on and talked to him anyway because I think he's autistic, and I have some sympathy with people who, have a social disconnect. I had a lot of lessons to learn when I was younger about how to deal with people and how not to piss people off all the time with, um, humor that makes them uncomfortable and arrogance and things of that nature. I got over that in my 20s. This guy's in his 60s.
Mm. Yeah, and just to let some younger people know, like whenever content creators say, "Oh, you're too scared to debate me," so and so demolished you. If they're being serious and they're using this type of language, I'll even speak on behalf of Christian content creators. If they hear that being spoken about them, we all are just dismissing you. Like, you are nothing to us when you start talking that way. So if you want to be, even if you believe it, if you want to engage, you got to change your strategy and pretend that you're just a little child and that you're willing to learn. Basically, take my methodology of how I treat presups.
I mean, if the guy really cared about like learning things, and instead of pissing off R and Ra, he would say, "Could I please go on your show and have evolution explained to me? That would be really nice. I'd appreciate your time and help with that." Instead of, "You don't know what you're talking about. Here's a stupid thing about evolution that nobody believes. Oh wait, why are you running away from me now?"
Speaking of evolution, and I started this live stream with Jonathan McClatchy, he on Twitter yesterday or the day before admitted that if evolution via common sense is true, Christianity is most likely false. He admitted this.
Okay, but he's an evolutionary biologist.
Yeah, but he doesn't believe in common descent.
No, I think he believes in common descent. He just thinks that intelligent design's mixed in there.
Oh.
I think. Pretty sure. Yeah, like, God went in and manipulated genes and stuff. And like he thinks that there are hurdles they couldn't have gotten over naturally. I could be wrong, but, and so that those needed a little bit of help. But the family tree still exists.
Yeah,
pretty sure.
Yeah, what you're saying does ring a bell with me too, but then what he said on Twitter the other day does not make sense.
I mean, he said some things at other times that don't make sense.
True.
I saw his debate with Cosmic Skeptic, and I was just baffled why he would. I can't remember what argument he used, but I looked at this and thought, isn't that an argument that's just been destroyed so many times? I can't believe he's using it in a formal debate. But so I talked to him about it on Twitter, and he's like, "No, it's a great argument."
Which argument?
Whatever. I don't remember. You'd have to watch the debate between him and
Embarrassment.
Cosmic Skeptic. No, I don't know. It's like one of these, like fine tuning or cosmological, or I don't know, something like that. So,
well, what can I do to make you feel better after losing and getting demolished by Trey Jadlow yesterday?
Oh, actually, it was this morning.
This morning.
You've done it. You let me on your show for a few minutes.
Oh, there you go.
Just getting to hang out with you for just a couple of minutes. It just makes me feel.
Well,
better.
Timothy, I am well known for how much I care about people's feelings, so I'm happy to help.
Anyway,
yeah. Take care. I got another guy who wants on here.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Man of Steel. He's waiting to find out that he's on live here. What are you doubting about right now, Man of Steel? Think about it. What really bothers you right now? He's thinking. Yeah, I can't hear you, but you're on. Make sure your mic is set. Kenny, you think you're that interesting? Bad PR move. No. I just want to hear from more people. No, you're still not audible. Go to the gearbox top right, make sure your thing's set right, and then refresh. We'll try that. Kenny, you'd be better off just saying you find homosexuality icky and leave it at that. Because that's what I say. Do you know how to refresh, Man of Steel? Top left, refresh. Come back in. Okay, figure it out. We'll let instrumental reason in. Instrumental reason. Can you hear me? I can hear you. Ah, welcome. What did you want to talk about today? Are you a theist, atheist, something in between?
I am an atheist, so long time viewer, first time caller.
Welcome to the Rush Limbaugh Show.
No, I'm an atheist. I've been an atheist for about 4 years now. I was, evangelical Christian my whole life up until about 24 years old. Nothing you haven't heard before. I've often thought about calling and seeing, like, doing kind of seeing if you'd be interested in like a devil's advocate kind of thing. Like, how far can I get trying to argue from a theistic point of view? But I originally earlier called in because I was prompted by some of the things Kenny said. I wondered if I could, probably would have been easier to just type a question to him and
On the
have you
gay
read it to
thing?
him. But I had
Okay,
some.
what did you want to ask Kenny?
I'm curious, like, and I've been kind of pondering this lately, and just curious from the Christian perspective in general, like what drawing this point of comparison. So here's the kind of idea, right? It's like showing them, okay, obviously, like, there are differences of opinion and philosophical views when it comes to like grounding morality and what we consider moral and immoral and how we parse all that out, right? But even across the barrier, the theism atheism barrier, we can still find common ground. And so to illustrate that, like, if Kenny came to me and said, do you think I think I think X is wrong for whatever reason, and I think X is wrong because I read the scripture, this biblical passage that seems to indicate whatever. That's, as an atheist, that's not gonna hold much weight for me.
Yeah,
I'm
but you
gonna
know
be
what
like,
Kenny would say,
okay,
right? You said, well, the reason why atheists and theists find common ground on some things is because God has written his moral code on all our hearts. Can I get an amen, Kenny?
yeah, for sure. I'm just curious how. So here's the rest of it, right? So like he would definitely say that, and that would come up at some point. But you could tell Kenny, well, even if I'm an atheist and you can't say to me, like, you know, scripture X says this, therefore you should consider X wrong, like that won't do anything for me. But if you appeal to, common ground, things we value, disvalue. So if you say, well, this X is immoral because it causes unnecessary suffering, then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
we have some common ground and we can bridge that. So I'm curious if he or Christians can, and I assume even Kenny and most theists would, assent to, yes, we can reach common ground even if we don't have whatever, but the common ground on the theological playing field. So I'm curious with the gay issue, if, to me, like, it seems the gay issue is different from other kind of moral considerations because all you can do is appeal to scripture.
No,
Like, if
I've heard some theists do some other things. Like,
well, all you can reasonably do is or you know, I don't, because I've heard
STD
as
rates
well,
higher
like,
among gay people
yes,
than
right.
doing harm. So if you follow God's
Yeah.
menu of prescriptions, you can avoid STDs. Procreating, can't, like Kenny brought that up. If you desire kids of the same genetics as you, sorry, you're out of luck. You have to adopt.
Right.
And that might cause some people some sadness that, oh, I don't have a child that looks sort of like me. So yeah, they can give arguments like that.
They can. I think, like, well, how, I guess let me ask you, like, how reasonable do you think? Because I've actually had that put to me. I talked with a close family member, and they said, yeah, well, like AIDS and STDs and all that kind of stuff, like, isn't that? And I remember replying, like, so straight people don't get STDs ever, or, you know, that's not.
Well, but a
something that
smart
happens
Christian
there.
would
No,
say
it does happen there,
it's just
but it's
not a high
it's just the
rate.
right.
Yeah.
But then is it like so God is like banning this behavior because he's banning it because he's protecting us from he bans this one behavior because he bans, you know, he bans gay sex outright because, you know, it's supposedly increases the likelihood of whatever. But if that likelihood goes down a little bit with heterosexual sex, then all of a sudden, like, okay, go for it.
But what was the question you wanted to ask Kenny?
Just about that, like, if he thought if there was
I think he would say yes.
thing he could appeal to other than, you know, scripture.
Yeah, I think he would.
And if so, what is it?
He would say yes, and he, on any topic, he would say, you should do this because this will help you here, here, and here. Now, in his mind, he's still thinking, but this is because it's God's plan and design, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't have to say that out loud, even though he believes it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think
I think you could. I think you could. I think I could appeal to scripture in response to that objection he might raise and say, like, scripturally speaking, you know, like, you know, you can form a theological argument possibly about how God's banning it to diminish, you know, probabilities of whatever, or illness, but is that what scripture says? Like, as far as I'm aware, it just says, it doesn't say, don't do this because I'm looking out for you and STD rates are higher and whatever. It's like, no, it's an abomination.
True. That's true. So you'd have to be a little bit,
you know,
of a sneaky
if he
Christian.
a Christian who's going to go down that road is going to have to reckon with.
You should do it because the Lord said so.
Yeah, feel free to point out the passage in scripture
What's your
where it
first
talks
name?
about Braden.
Well, pleased to meet you, Braden. I got the guy who came in before you, I think, figured out his sound stuff. So.
Oh, cool.
Take care,
Yeah,
Braden.
nice to meet you, Doug.
Yep, have a good Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Did you get it to work? No, still can't hear you. Can you hear me? Put your thumb up if you can hear me. Can't hear you. Can you hear me? Put up your thumb if you can hear me. Okay, so you can't even hear me. I'll take some questions on the live stream chat before I go. The better your questions, the longer I'll stay. Man of Steel actually reminds me of the thought experiment of your spouse or someone you love is about to die. You can't save them, but you can call upon Yahweh, or you can call upon Superman, Man of Steel, to save your loved one. Who do you call upon? Knowing what you know about Yahweh and how often he intervenes, and knowing what you know about Superman, that question bothers theists, Christians a lot. Bothers them a lot. What would you ask William Lane Craig if he was here? I would ask him, Would you believe that Jesus rose from the dead if all you had was Paul's letters? And then I would keep it going. Because he's a minimal facts type guy. How goes the new diet? I'm not really on a new diet. Who's this guy? Pisario? Can you hear me? Pizarro? Who's your favorite apologist of all time? For some reason, I think you like Braxton a lot. Well, I like Braxton. He's funny.
Hello, PineCreek. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can't hear you. Give me a thumbs up.
I can hear you. You can't hear me? What's wrong with people and their audios nowadays?
Still can't hear you. Hang on one second.
No. Not doing that. Juan Dale Dingle, thank you for the buck. I'm in luck. $300 viewers when PineCreek talks about theism, 80 viewers when PineCreek talks about politics. Yeah, that's true. PineCreek politics channels out there. I'll go one more round here. It's on my banner. Doug, you didn't answer my question. What was it again? Oh, favorite apologist of all time. As an atheist now? Ravi Zacharias. He's my favorite apologist when I was a Christian. One of them. And he is now my favorite as an atheist, even though he's dead. Because he provides great lessons to be learned. That the evidence for the life and ministry of Ravi Zacharias far supersedes the evidence for the evidence for the life and ministry of Jesus. You are wrong about Ravi, you are wrong about Jesus. That's just science. Worst Christian argument of all time. I know the Bible's true because the Bible says so. Where did I come up with the name PineCreek? Asked Quendale Dingle. I came up with it because it was the name of the creek that ran in the backyard of the farm, or through the property of our farm growing up in Canada. So it has sentimental value to me. I had fun in PineCreek. I almost drowned in PineCreek. I fed the horses and the cattle in the PineCreek. I fished in the PineCreek. I bathed in the PineCreek. I wasn't baptized in the PineCreek. I was baptized in a pool with chlorine. Poof. Boxers, B.S. Lewis. Boxers.